two networks. One is a network of people, and another is a network of conversations. And really, to mash up those two networks really becomes a network where you can have lots of different kinds of connections being made, but fundamentally imagine three types of connections. Connections between people, so, you know, kind of standard social network kind of scenarios. And that gets kind of interesting because you can detect who you've spoken with in a conversation, and then that's a certain kind of connection. You're not necessarily friends. You don't necessarily even know each other, but you've spoken with each other, right? So you may not even know each other by name, but I mean, most likely you do, because you see people's names in the, you know, on the Zoom interface. But anyway, people-to-people connections. Then there are connections between people and conversations. Like, I'm connected to this conversation in two ways. I'm a participant. I'm also a moderator. I'm also organizer, whatever. So, and each of you in this meeting is connected to this conversation as well by the same token. So, and then there's connections between conversations. Hey, both of these conversations have to do with this topic. In general, a given conversation will cover multiple topics, but if a given pair of conversations both cover a topic in question, that's one connection. If they cover two topics in question, that's two connections, and so on. So, and all that is interesting because if you consider kind of the life trajectory of a person within the conversational domain, that person is, with respect to the conversational domain, being in a video conference where they're participating, with respect to that domain only, that individual is offline, 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 offline. If you think of time as being the upward dimension, they're offline, 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 and then boop, they're in this conversation, right? For whatever period of time, 3 hours, whatever. And then boop, they're offline, 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 and then they're in another conversation for half an hour. And then boop, they're offline, 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 and then in another conversation. And so you can, you know, that's kind of the conversational trajectory of that person, you could say, right? And within that conversational trajectory, I now have associated, you know, as one of the connections, I now have a connection to those portions of those conversations that I participated in. Therefore, I'm connected to the text in those same conversations. Um, and then imagine that at the end of any given conversation in which I participate, I have the option of rating that conversation and, you know, saying how valuable it was for me. Um, do I want to I want to participate in similar conversations in the future? Do I want to participate in that same series of conversations so that it gets populated on my calendar for the next week, assuming it's a weekly conversation? And in fact, imagine that right at the end of a given conversation, when I hit, leave meeting or whatever, okay, by default, my bot might check in with me and debrief me very quickly. And the bot might start the conversation with me. So, Jamin, what did you think? And I might say, well, I thought it was really interesting, but it feels like this group doesn't particularly, get, topic XYZ, except for Oswald. Oswald, he really seemed to get it, but everybody else in the meeting, nah. So I want to find more people like Oswald who understand XYZ, whatever, right? That could be just part of my debriefing. And notice how there are certain keywords in what I'm using, in what I'm describing. Keywords being like, this person understands this topic, right? These other people don't get it. Um, and, or, I value their knowledge of, right? So there's certain words that are used over and over in one characterizing their experiences in a given conversation. And all of that data, where within a debriefing, my sentences can be parsed out and where am I going with this? Where I'm going with this is by having all of the data of every individual's trajectory through the conversational domain. If you take that data set as a whole, and take the data set for an individual, through pattern matching, the system will be able to, for any given participant, do predictions of how much that participant will like or dislike, might like or dislike participating in a given conversation, which could be a conversation that's in flight right now, B, a conversation scheduled for next week because it's part of an ongoing series. Or C, it could be a conversation that doesn't yet exist. It's not on the calendar. And the system is simply saying, hey, I predict that if you really want to have an awesome meeting on whatever topic, say SRM, meet with these 4 other people. And if you approve, I'll, set about scheduling it. And what that would really mean is that my bot would talk with the bots of those other humans and see if they can agree upon a time, a day and a time for all of us to get together and meet on the topic in question. My bot would know that I prefer long format meetings, right? But I'm happy to have a meeting of any length. So the bottom line is all this data can be used to help people identify and schedule time in whatever meetings they should be in, according to the pattern matching, the machine learning. Hey, that's totally fine, Oswald. No problem. Just hang out. This is a party. This is a block party. So it's totally fine to just hang out and drink a Colt 45 or something like that. No problem. No one is ever under any pressure to speak at the block party or any other meetings I host. It's totally fine just to chill. It's Friday night after all. Soon to be Saturday morning. And we have 7 hours of block party to go. The Post-Carbon Institute people saw the link to Radish, but haven't responded. Hopefully they join sometime. Well, awesome. Well, thank you, Oswald, for that update and for sharing that link with them. Super cool. Yeah. All righty. Yeah, the Guy McPherson stuff is a big pill to swallow. And it just seems like some people simply don't have the capacity to even seriously contemplate the scenarios as laid out by Guy McPherson. think it's easier for upper class or lower class to accept McPherson than middle class. You know, it's interesting. In my experience, it's the hardest for the upper class to accept it. Probably the easiest for the lower class, and somewhere in the middle for the middle class. And the reason I say that, well, partly out of personal experience, and actually very heavily from personal experience. The thing is, the folks in the so-called upper class, their reality is so distorted by not having to worry about, working and just having all that they want, that they become attached to those privileges, and they just cannot imagine them going away. It's almost just like a flaw of humanity. I heard this story, y'all have probably heard about it, of there's some tiny monkey in Africa with like really tiny, skinny, bony hands, and they love to eat, I think it's macadamia nuts or some kind of nut that's grown in that part of Africa. And the villagers devised a trap to trap the monkey who was trying to eat their nuts that they would harvest from these trees. And they created this trap out of, I don't know, maybe bamboo or something, where they would put a couple of the nuts inside, and the monkey would see the nuts inside the trap. It was like a box kind of thing, like a cage, a little mini cage kind of thing. And the cage in turn was tied to a tree. So the monkey would stick its hand in through the bars like this. You see how you can make your hand really flat, and then grab the nut. But once it had its hand around the nut and it tried to get its hand out, it couldn't get its hand out of the box, right? And they would put two of the nuts in the box. But here's the thing. So the monkey couldn't get its hand out, and it presumably understood what was going on, but it simply could not let go of the nut. It could not let go. And so its hand would remain stuck in the trap. And then they'd have another nut inside the cage also. And what the monkey would then do is take its other hand, stick it through the bars, and grab the other nut. And now both hands are stuck. And that was literally an effective trap to catch these monkeys. But it's kind of a statement of primates generally, or it could be interpreted that way, that we get attached to stuff. And when we get attached, we're attached, right? Like, let's say when you fall in love with another human being, right? You form an attachment. You want to see them, you want to be with them, you want to call them, you want to be in contact, you want to marry them, you want to have kids with them, you want to spend your life with them. That's attachment. Now, that's a good thing, and that's a wonderful. Okay, great, fine. I'm not questioning. Oh, but it's spiritual. It's so much far. It's so farther beyond the human that okay, fine. I'm just pointing out that it's attachment. We have a tendency toward attachment, and interesting. Need to trap the upper class into conversation with the lower. I once orchestrated such a happening, and it was quite interesting. It was Guy McPherson was giving. I was hosting him in California to give a talk at the Sierra Club there, and I had many guests of mine come, including the folks from all classes, And I remember a relatively poor person there, so to speak, talking about how for them it's like, this is almost like freaking good news, because for once, the the rich people, and the rich white people in this case, are finally feeling the heat, right? Whereas they had just been in kind of la la land, just enjoying their privileges and never feeling any heat of any kind, seemingly. So anyway, but it's certainly not as hard for the poor to wrap their minds and hearts around this. They have a lot less to be attached to, and they don't have that much trouble imagining bad scenarios. So, but what's interesting is, even though certain segments of society have a real hard time, wrapping their heads around the Guy McPherson scenarios, pretty much everyone's got their head wrapped around the coronavirus. There's no escaping that one. I mean, there's no hiding from it. So, and those are both in the class of planetary mega problem. So whereas before they weren't really clued into planetary mega problems, now they're clued into at least one. But that's crucial, because now therefore they now have experience with planetary mega problems, even though it's just one. All right, it's certainly hit home, and it's big, and it's huge, and it's killing people, and rapidly slowing down the economy, etc. But then a huge collateral benefit to this whole situation. Yeah, McPherson has spoken about the coronavirus. We watched a video he did, about a 10-minute video or so, that's posted on guymcpherson.com on his blog. Is it a sign of things to come? A sign of things to come. Well, here's the thing. Whatever's coming is really, there's a whole menu of choices. And it's really up to us to figure out which of those menu items we're going to pick. So, I mean, really, we have so much power here. We could totally fix this place, cool the planet, etc. And we have to figure out how to do that, and how to basically sell it to humanity as a whole through various means and media. But it's totally doable. That's the point. And the access to doing it is collective superintelligence. We have to know how to do it so that we can do it. But anyway, as I was saying, this big collateral benefit is that now you've got everybody at home and everybody's on Zoom video conferences. And so the network of conversations is just springing up. But they're all so isolated from each other. They're like a network minus the connections, right? CSI virus, exactly. Yeah, we are fighting fire with fire and fighting the coronavirus with the CSI virus and with various idea viruses, actually. Every meme is an idea virus or a potential idea virus. And a set of memes laid out in a particular order, let's just call it a sequence of memes, a sequence of memes tells a story. We can actually write a new story for humanity, which is extremely compelling because it, the punchline of the story is we get to live. We all get to live. I mean, all who can possibly be saved. And therefore it's very compelling. And then if you unpack the story, well, you can the first level of unpacking is unpacking it into its sequence of memes, right? Each of those memes is a potential idea virus, and the story as a whole, the sequence of memes as a whole, constituting a story, a whole story, that can be a big idea virus as a whole. This is really interesting, what Oswald, what you just wrote. I don't think you heard this from me, but let me read it out loud. The internet has ended up corralling conversations into smaller niche/isolated communities overall. Now, is that a recent phenomenon or just a general phenomenon observed over, say, the last several years? I think it's the latter. A general phenomenon, because last several years, I agree. Because here's the thing with the Zoomosphere, the public Zoomosphere, like the Block Party. I mean, if there were a bunch of different, sort of equivalent gatherings in the Zoomosphere that were all open to the public, anyone to join, then the people inhabiting these different conversations, yes, they would come from a niche community defined by the people who, get together to talk about solving the world's problems, and or get together to talk about collective intelligence. But I think instead of being a small niche community and a small isolated community, to the contrary, I think it's a relatively large niche and not isolated. And I think that has to do with this medium itself, the medium of, and it's not just the medium of Zoom. Not just the medium of Zoom, but more specifically, video conferences that are broadcast, recorded, published publicly, and even open to the public. People who participate in those kind of conversations, in this kind of conversation, they're generally people who are not hiding out somewhere, right? Versus people like in a specific Facebook group or a specific Twitter hashtag, whatever. These are people who are communicating mainly through text, and it's almost like they're playing some weird sort of text-based video game, computer game, where it's like, okay, I'm going to post this inside this. I'm going to comment this on this Facebook group. And they comment, and then they see what happens. I mean, they're interacting with a freaking computer screen. Well, so are we, but at least we're talking with people face to face versus sending symbols, right? Words that represent stuff. I mean, yeah, I'm using words too, but I'm using gestures and tonality, and I'm, varying my speed with which I'm talking, etc. And you wrote the internet wasn't supposed to happen that way, but it did. Ugh. And you think it might have been a Douglas Rushkoff podcast. Yeah. I mean, the internet, the whole point of the internet is to do amazing scenarios like collective superintelligence. I mean, what a maximum expression of the internet to have collective superintelligence with all of its various parts, actually. Ugh, I got to get up and stretch. All right. Sort of a light rain, borderline drizzle going on here, but a very quiet night. So, because of the nature, the very nature of these because of the nature of this medium, right? And like I said, more specifically, that it's recorded, broadcast, anyone can join and all that. The people who jump in and participate in this particular medium, in this particular way, are not isolated people. They're not people. We're not people who want to be isolated from other people, right? We're not isolated from other people. To the contrary, we're pretty social people, I would say, as a group. We're not playing a video game. We're participating in actual conversations. So what's significant about that is that we're going to tend to find each other. In other words, people in the block party are going to find people in other groups and vice versa, and we're going to cross-pollinate. Versus those who gravitate towards a very narrow bandwidth form of communication, which is text-based, which I make the analogy, it's like passing notes under the door versus opening the door and having an actual conversation. So we are helping to create the social network of actual conversations, or snack bar, as we refer to it as an acronym, SNAC, Social Network of Actual Conversations. And rather than be like a tiny little niche community, I think it's just going to be this expanding, expansive thing, expanding to include all people who, like us, like to talk with other people about things that matter. And we're not trying to have those conversations in a freaking closet. We're having them out in the open, right? Anyway, all these facets and aspects for me are pointing in a very positive direction, which is a direction of a network coming together, of people actually connecting with each other, having actual conversations. All right, I'm going to take a little trip to the little scholar's room and stretch my legs for a bit. I'll be back in like 4 or 5 minutes or so, something like that. Okay, I'll be back shortly. See you all in a few. Alrighty. What exciting conversations have you all been engaged in while I've been away?